Welcome, friends, to episode 3 of Friends Finding Faith. Relationships are always a mystery, and one of the hardest things for us to navigate in our lives is the interaction between people who all have their own reasons, goals, driving force. Relationships should leave us feeling uplifted, fulfilled with mutual respect. And then there are those other kinds of relationships. We refer to them now as toxic. Now, the Bible tells us in Corinthians 13, 4-7, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Join us this week, friends, as we explore toxic relationships and how the Bible tells us we should navigate those. And here is our friend Alaina. How are you doing this morning?
It's just early.
Yeah, we record really early in the mornings. We each have full-time jobs and full families and volunteer work. Alaina does a lot of that. So we record in the wee hours of the morning before we have to go make breakfast for everybody. But Alaina, what can you tell us about toxic relationships? What are they now? What's that definition?
So, toxic relationships are negative behaviors and communication patterns that are harmful to one or both parties, often involving controlling, manipulative, or abusive partners. Now, I kind of want to actually explore the difference between that and the healthy relationship. Now, a healthy relationship actually is mutual respect, trust, open communication, and safety.
That's tough. That's such a difference anymore. Just because, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you didn't really hear the word toxic used in this way at all. It's such a new thing almost.
Yeah, people really didn't actually talk about it back when I was younger.
No, no, you didn't talk about it. It was always shrouded. Don't put your personal stuff out there. Don't advertise. But it's almost like if you don't advertise, you can't get the help that you need. Now, Alaina and I both wanted to be able to talk about toxic relationships with our friends because we've both been through many, and there are so many people in the world that do go through these toxic, abusive relationships in their lives. And there's always that question, what do I do? Is this me? Am I doing wrong? It's always just this huge question. So let's see. What kind of behaviors do you see in a toxic relationship? What's the difference?
So, when I was like kind of researching this earlier this week, I found that it's consistent criticism and belittling, manipulating and gaslighting, controlling and possessive behavior, emotional and physical abuse, withholding affection and attention, isolation from family and friends, blaming and shamings, and then passive aggressive behavior.
So, one of the things that I ran into within the past decade or two is the phrase, the word gaslighting. Okay, so gaslighting is when somebody tells you you're crazy and you know you're not. When you're having that argument with a friend of yours and you're saying, "I swear, I never said that about you." "Yes, you did. I heard you. You're crazy." Gaslighting is taking what somebody says and twisting it around so that way you are always the victim. That person that's gaslighting is the victim. They're the ones that are always right. They're that person that is 100% always right, and they are never wrong, and they will never admit to being wrong.
Now, actually, something that I found was interesting was the passive aggressive behavior. Do you know what that means?
Passive aggressive. I may not go right along with the dictionary definition on it, but you got to look at the words and break them down as they are. Passive is something that is going to just let you go through it. An aggressor is going to fight. So a passive aggressive person is going to, let's say, you're waiting in line at the grocery store and your child is throwing a temper tantrum because they can't have the gum that's in the aisle. Because we all know how the kids see those little toys in the aisle. I want it, mommy, give it to me, mommy. And then you tell them no. And the child just gets more and more upset and starts screaming. And then you're there. Okay, stop, honey. Calm down, calm down. And then you've got everybody staring at you. What's going on? Why is this person? Blah, blah, blah. And then the lady in front of you, instead of turning around and looking at you directly, why can't you take care of your kid? They're standing up there talking to their husband or whoever's with them, and they say, I don't know why people can't control their children. That is passive aggressive.
Yeah, I always thought that when I saw that passive aggressive behavior, I didn't realize that that was a form of like a toxic relationship, because you'll see that actually a lot in a lot of your friendships too.
Any kind of relationship can bring about any kind of toxic relationship. You'll get a lot of these even in your normal relationships. You'll do it with your husband, your son, your daughter, without even really realizing it, because a lot of it does come out of natural human behavior. It's a lot of these things are defense mechanisms. Isolating someone, you're scared what they're going to do, like talking from the person that would be putting the other down. They're going to isolate you because they don't want you to talk to somebody and tell them what you're doing. You blame someone constantly. It's a form of control and manipulation, because then you're putting someone down. You've got the big thumb.
And then also I've seen like pretty much when they criticize you or whatever, they're never the ones at fault for anything. They're always the victim. So they like to victimize themselves.
Yep, and that's where that gaslighting comes into play.
Yep.
And with the manipulation can even go to someone that will not take no for an answer. They love to use that in sales. Don't take no for an answer. That makes a good salesman, but it's a bully.
Oh yeah, I've actually seen my kid actually do that. Whenever I won't like let him have something, he will continue to come into my room and talk to me and like put this like if I'm distracted, he'll find a way to ask me while I'm distracted to get me to say yes, or he'll get me to agree to something. Mom, yes. And then I'm distracted and I say yes. So yeah, I completely get that.
That is 100% bullying. And with that, I actually am going to bring up our first Bible story with it. One of the big things to realize when you're dealing with toxic relationship is to actually set boundaries. Boundaries is so ridiculously important in any relationship, just to be able to be yourself and have that room. One of the big things in the Bible that we see is with Jesus, actually. He does this. He sets boundaries a lot. And he mentions how this is just what he needs to do. This is something he needs. If we look at Matthew 14, 22 to 23, we see about Jesus was out and he spent all day teaching all these thousands of people from the mountaintop, and they don't have microphones, man. He got to shout. You got to think, this man is standing on a mountain talking just as loud as he can to all these people for hours. So he's out there talking to all these people, performing miracles. He got the Holy Spirit going down through him for hours, man. That's tiring. That's exhausting. So while he's doing all this, he also had just lost his friend John. So he's dealing with grief. So after everyone leaves, you'll have those stragglers and all this, but Jesus goes up the hill to pray, basically to have some father-son time, or him time, depending on how you look at it. But it's a great story because there's these people that want Jesus to come back, do more, talk more, tell us more, teach us more, come teacher, teach us more. But he doesn't.
Hmm.
He prays and he takes that time for himself to be able to recharge, to be able to be good for who he is. It's so important. You can't just let people walk all over you. But it's also very hard not to. Because the Bible always tells us to be kind and patient. So, how do you know when to actually start doing that? I mean, you've got, yeah, how do you recognize when it goes from healthy relationship to toxic?
Okay, let me see. I actually read up on this. So I found 5 ways to recognize the symptoms, kind of like what's actually going on. Criticism that creates an unsafe place for a relationship to survive, physical, verbal, sexual abuse, or differentiated self, inability to say no, not communicating wants or needs.
I mean, how many times in your life did you just not say, I need a drink of water, or I need this, or I need that, because you were worried about what the response was going to be?
Oh, I'm sure there was several times because I just didn't know what was going to happen next. You kind of almost had to like plan your next moves for what you were going to do with anything because you felt like you were walking on constant eggshells.
All of those things that Alaina just listed are the perfect trifecta, the 5 ways there to really recognize A, when you are in a toxic relationship, and B, when someone you know has been in a toxic relationship before and has been verbally, mentally, or physically abused. Those are all very clear signs. Somebody that's gone through these relationships can't say no.
The people who knew me before have even said, Elena, you were so depressed, you were so quiet, and now you're going out and doing things with other people. You're happier. You're more open to talk about things. As before, I was just quiet, kept to myself, didn't really go anywhere. So you can definitely tell a difference whenever you get out of one of those toxic relationships versus when you actually enter into a healthy, safe relationship.
Absolutely. And a lot of that also shows up in the Bible in a lot of places. I mean, I know you told me you found a really good story about a toxic relationship in the Bible.
And I think it was last week, I talked about King David, and he is just one of my favorites because he almost goes through everything that we can basically think of in a modern just setting. He's basically gone through.
Yeah, and he's famous now, right? Isn't David famous? He has his own show.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to actually have to talk about that show. Go maybe do a quick little episode here later after I get a chance to watch it because I've heard such amazing things about it.
So what I actually kind of learned from David on this one is he actually, and you won't see this part in the show, but that's probably going to come in one of the later seasons. Um, but he, after he is basically chosen to be king or whatever, Saul recognizes that he's different from everybody else. He can tell that there's something special about David. He can't quite put his finger on it, and nobody has actually told him, this is who God has anointed. But he has just signs that have kind of like led him to this point to where, like, okay, well, I'm seeing there's something different about this dude. What exactly is that? Well, first of all, I will say David was he was the youngest. He was also the last one that Samuel chose, and the least likely of his brothers to be quote unquote the king type. So that was already going against him. He was kind of the oddball out. Then with that, the next thing that you'll notice with him is he is the only one of all of the Israelites to actually stand up to Goliath. I mean, that takes some kind of courage right there. That takes some kind of trust to actually step up and say, hey, I'm going to kill this giant. I don't think that I stand a chance, but I trust that my God is bigger than that. So he already was showing signs.
A lot of the Bible stories that I know, and I hate admitting this considering the subject matter of our podcast, a lot of the Bible stories I know I learned by reading Bible stories to my kids. So a lot of my knowledge comes from little kid Bible stories, but I'll tell you what, those books are amazing anymore. Oh, I love them. With Saul and David, that alone was just such a bad relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So horrible. Tell us a little bit more about the story, because you'll probably tell it better than I will any day.
Well, actually, it gets to the point where, he's actually finally realized, hey, I'm not going to be king anymore. They've chosen this guy, which by that point, and the people were saying Saul kills his thousands while David kills his tens of thousands. I mean, he was just so much better than Saul in so many different ways. And he's jealous of him.
And I can't imagine, because Saul, as the king at the time, right?
Yes, yeah, he still hadn't been dethroned or anything yet.
So you got to imagine the ego that's behind that, right? And you hear a lot of talk about narcissists now and sociopaths and all this other stuff, and everybody's their own psychiatrist and can diagnose anyone. So when somebody is in that level of power, they have a tendency to have this massive ego, the id, so to speak. And Saul, hearing that, would have just been butthurt on some kind of level.
Oh, yeah.
Because this little nothing nobody is coming up and making him look bad.
Oh, yeah.
So what does he do? What does he do to him? What does Saul react to David?
At some point, you see him throwing a spear at David, and he just barely misses him. So that was kind of one of the first things that you'll see. And then there's so many other times when he actually chased David, like basically all over the country. Anywhere you can imagine, he probably chased him.
Yeah, he was actually trying to hunt him down, right?
Yeah.
So Saul actually brings David into the castle, so to speak, and they're buds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're friends and they're getting along fine. And then Saul's ego gets snapped down. Just like when you tell a narcissist no, or you put those boundaries out there and say, hey, this is what needs to happen in order for me to do my end of things. So he's butthurt.
Yes.
And he ends up basically going out and trying to kill David.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he basically did try to take him out. Like, there's several different times, though, but I can only imagine what he was kind of going through as well at the time, because it said there was a dark spirit that came over Saul. So he was essentially going crazy, and you'll see that a lot in the show, too. They do a pretty good job of showing that side of that.
I can't even wait. Like, I'm so excited to sit down and watch this. I might binge it. I'll never sleep again. So, is there any good relationships in David's story? Because, I mean, we talked about him and Bethesda, or Bathsheba, and then we talked about him and Saul.
Oh, yeah.
Has the man ever had a good relationship?
Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, Jonathan. And wasn't Jonathan Saul's son?
Oh, yeah, he was.
Oh, my gosh, it sounds like a bad episode of Jerry Springer.
What I love about Jonathan, though, is he remains loyal to David, even no matter what. It's like he recognized that the Lord had chosen him, like that he had chosen David over him, basically to be the next king. But instead of getting jealous over all of that, he chooses to remain loyal to his friend, and he was loyal to him until the very end. In fact, David actually takes in Jonathan's son and raises him basically as his own.
Really? I didn't know that. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to get all weepy. That is so sweet. All right. So loyalty. Loyalty is something that you see a lot in the Bible. So much.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things that really is such an important foundation for any good relationship. But the loyalty has to go both ways. You can't balance a relationship when one side is weighed down. It doesn't work that way. It does talk about that because there's one thing that I've noticed that in a lot of bad relationships, the abuser likes to use as an excuse. It's actually a piece of scripture, if you can believe that.
Oh, I'd never realized that part.
Yeah. It actually comes from, and excuse my pronunciation. My pronunciations are horrible. So put comments in the down below to tell me how I say it to say this right. Okay, friends, that's let's be good friends and give me some suggestions. It'd be awesome. Anyway, so in Colossians,
Colossians.
yeah, Colossians. There, thank you. Anyway, in Colossians 3:18 and 19, all right, it reads, "Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord." They'll stop there. And they'll stop there and say, "Nope, nope, you're under my thumb. I am the big thumb. You are down here. I put my foot down. You don't matter. You're the woman." I've heard it so many times. And then I actually read it. Because it goes on. So, friends, it goes on. It. So the full verse is, "Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord." They will stop it. And then they won't continue. It also goes on to say, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them."
Oh, they never do.
They never mention that part.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
No, they don't. And it's a balance. You can't have one without the other. You can't have somebody be your support system and make all the dinners all the time without occasionally picking up the slack.
So, Sarah, have you ever had one of those toxic relationships where you've gotten out of one of those and then you get into a new one? What was one of the differences that you actually saw?
Oh, from going from toxic and then finding one that's not?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I've been in so many toxic relationships, it's not even funny. And I really attribute that to not being in close to Christ at the time. Because I think if I would have had prayer and I would have had God and Jesus, I would have actually been able to get a lot out of those a lot faster. I can speak with such passion about the gaslighting and the manipulation and everything else that comes with these toxic relationships because I've been there multiple times in different aspects. Friendships, romantic relationships, familial relationships, it's everywhere. And one thing that I did learn is that toxic relationships, and I know a lot of you are going to argue with me about this because this isn't always the case, but it isn't always not the case when it takes two to tango. Not every single toxic relationship is an aggressor and a victim. It's always a massive gray area as to who is the problem. What it ends up being is that two personalities cannot get.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I've seen some of my aggressors. I'll just call them aggressors because I'd rather not point out anybody in specifics. That's awful. I don't want to do that. So, like, one of my aggressors went on and had this really great relationship, an amazing relationship, and they were an amazing team. But this person and I in a room together is bad. It is just so bad because the personalities might be fun to go out and play, but when there's actual things to be discussed, those personalities can't get along. Now, having moved on throughout my life, and then I met my husband, my current husband, who works with me, who took that time to get to know me, and it is easeless. Never once have I sat in the room with this man and felt uncomfortable. So, are there any other stories in the Bible that are a really good representation of what a toxic relationship is?
Honestly, when you brought up just a toxic relationship, just two different personalities working together, I think about actually Samson and Delilah. I know I don't have that one listed, but that one's one of that one pretty much stuck out to me. Do you know anything about Samson and Delilah?
Not even a little bit. I love to hear it. Please.
So Samson was this big, really strong, hulky dude. So when I think of him, I think of a long-haired version of the Hulk, or not the Hulk, the Rock. um, he was big. He was built. He was a threat against his enemies, definitely. So in comes Delilah. She is somebody that their enemy at the time sent to basically take down Samson. And basically, he saw a pretty face and was like, "Oh, I really, really like this woman." Okay, the only way he could actually keep his strength is he had that really long hair, and the Lord said that he wasn't supposed to cut it, or otherwise he would lose his strength. And essentially, what happened is Delilah came in the night while he was sleeping and cut off all that hair, and thinking that it's going to be completely the downfall of that kingdom. Um, he woke up the next day, was basically overpowered and put in prison. But essentially, he just cried out to the Lord and was like, "Lord, please remove me from this." And the Lord um, gave him the strength to take down. He's set in these two pillars. He's chained up, and he's essentially just waiting to die. And he cried out to the Lord, and he said, "Lord, please take me out of this situation." So he gives Samson the strength to pull down these pillars. But when he takes down these pillars, he takes everybody in that radius with him, including himself. So that's a good example of a toxic relationship. He saw a pretty face. She was conniving. He thought that she had his interest and he didn't. And yeah, that's a crazy story, but that's a good one.
It is a very good one. It really does show it. And it actually brings us to a really, really good point with how do you know when to get out? How do you know when it's no longer a relationship to work on, something that is a challenge put before you? When do you know when it's gone too far? When is it time to actually leave?
Something you can think of with that is you can see how does it affect you.
How did you know?
Like you have low self-esteem, low self-worth, anxiety, depression, feeling of worthlessness and inadequacy, insecurity, and trauma. For me, in previous relationships that I've had, it was honestly when I just took a step back and I'm like, why am I still with this person? Why am I still hanging out with this person? I am not myself. I am not my truest self. I'm not happy. In fact, actually, one of the things that really stuck out with me is my mom was like, "Hey, I know when you hang out with this person, you are just not a happy person. You come back even sadder than when you left." So that was just kind of an eye opener for me. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do next?
I always look at it like, okay, God in our lives wants us to find joy in everything. I mean, that's all what it is. Even in the Bible, it just says about, wanting to find that joy and find love in the world, right? Because God is always talking about love and perfect love and compassionate love. I always see that the minute that you even think about walking out of a door, like the minute you think of really, really leaving, and it does not cause you any pain, like you know that you can walk out that door deep down in your soul and be fine. It's time to go. If you can see your life without that person in it and know that you would be better off, it is that deep soul, bottom of your stomach feeling of, I know.
Well, I will add to that though, on the flip side of that part. For me, I was so broken. I got to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I really actually can. And anytime I would actually think about it, I would start crying because I'm like, I'm just too afraid to deal with the actual pain of actually leaving that I didn't realize that it was actually harming me worse than it would have taken just to just deal with the pain. And I think if I had left sooner, I would have healed faster, honestly.
The Bible even tells us to lean back on God in all of those moments. Psalm 34, one of my favorites. Psalm 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He knows we're going to go through hurt. He knows we're going to be in pain. He knows we're going to get beat down and pushed into the dirt. He knows it. He knows everything. He already made it that way. But he's there for us when we're hurting, when we're brokenhearted, when we're suffering. Because just like with you were talking about Samson, take me out of here. I can't do this. And he's there for us, but he doesn't always come to us the way that we want. Just like we talked about with prayer, you can pray for the love of your life and end up with the best dog you ever had.
Exactly.
You know, it's never going to come to you the way that you want. It's going to come to you the way that you need. So that actually brings me over to Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So, oh, I love that one. But it doesn't say he's going to go in, reach down into that jail cell and pull Samson out. He gave Samson the strength to do it himself. The world's all about making yourself a better person and being closer to God. Even in the Bible, it tells us that when you're in a romantic relationship, you hold God first. You can't love your husband without him. And I can definitely see that because the relationship that I have now wouldn't be as strong as it is and easeful as it is without that foundation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I also want to kind of touch on like healthy relationships. Have you thought about that? Like what that means for us?
Well, I'll actually go straight into a story with healthy relationships just because I think it's a really good representation of one, and it isn't romantic. It's Ruth and Naomi. I think that is such an amazing representation of a good relationship. It's not romantic or anything like that, but it shows how to go from just being that friend to being more together, to building that. Because Ruth and Naomi, they both lost their husbands, right? They're both widows. And Naomi was Ruth's mother in law, basically. When they lost their husbands, Naomi says to Ruth, you need to go home, be with your family. They can help you find a new husband and they can take good care of you. I'm going to go back to my family in Bethlehem. I'm not going to have any way to take care of myself. But Ruth decides to go with Naomi. She shows her this loyalty of being a friend. Like, I'm not going to leave you by yourself. I'm not going to let you go through this alone. So with that loyalty, Ruth actually ends up getting massively blessed when she meets her new husband, who ends up taking amazing care of both her and Naomi because they worked hard together. Ruth would go out and get food together. She'd go and make sure that they both had stuff to eat. They worked together in a very good way.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that because actually, after you leave a toxic relationship and you really ask the Lord for a really good friend or a really good like companion that'll help you basically get through life. I've seen that so many times that when I've asked the Lord for, give me the friend that I need. For one example, I had just come out of a really toxic relationship and I was alone trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I actually went to ballet one night and I just happened to see this person that my mom had introduced me to maybe 2 years before, and her and I hit it off, and her and I are still friends to this day. And even just me being in Florida, she still reaches out and checks on me. And actually, she was um, my maid of honor in my my wedding. Still love her. Still enjoy having those conversations. But she helped me get through the terrible time of when I actually left. I still felt alone, but she was still constantly checking on me. And actually, after having left, she's like, "You are so much better off where you're at." She's mentioned it several times. She's like, "You are not the same person you were when you left." She said, "You when you left, you were still afraid of your shadow, essentially." Um, she said you wouldn't go out and do things she said you do things with. Uh, I would do things with her, and I would do things with the ballet, and I would do things with our karate as well. But I would never actually go out and just try to meet new people. And I'm not that person anymore. Just having left that toxic relationship, it freed me up to do so much more. And you are more your full self when you're able to leave those toxic relationships, I have found in my experience. And actually, another good example of a safe and healthy relationship is the one that I have with my friend on here now.
Yay, friends! Yes, that's the part. That's actually what led us to doing this. Friends Finding Faith is just because we were exploring it together, just as coworkers, and then you build upon that relationship and that similar interest and the discussion and the interest in those discussions that you have, and you can build that relationship. Alaina and I are extremely different. We come from different backgrounds, but we can still come together in a positive way. Not every relationship's going to be nasty.
I love that about our relationship too. Like, you keep me grounded most days, especially at work some days, because if I'm having a terrible day, you're like, it's okay to have a terrible day. It's okay to let it out. And you just let me do that a lot. Or if I'm having a great day, you let me just go on and on and on about it. I just love that about our relationship. But on the flip side, I can actually be that.
Exactly. And that comes back to that balance of, it's a relationship doesn't go one way. And that little scripture that talks about, a wife supporting the husband and a husband supporting a wife, but that goes to every single relationship in the Bible. You see it a lot with Jesus and the apostles. You see it a lot in the Old Testament. It's everywhere that you can't have one without the other. You've got to really meet in the middle. Now, what are some good ways to get out of a toxic relationship? Because I know this conversation can go on for hours, but we are going to try not to take up too much of our friends' time.
When I was looking this up and trying to understand what did I actually do with mine, I actually had to leave the situation. I found that when I left the situation,
Yeah, that's what it is a lot of the times. I mean, you were talking about David and Saul because David had to leave. Jonathan helped him get out, right?
yeah, he did.
Yep, sometimes you need help to get out. Sometimes you need that person to come to you and say, hey, dude's trying to kill you. Okay, we got to leave now.
Also, it's all about like recognizing the signs. I think the first thing actually you really need to do is recognize the signs to be able to say, hey, actually, I am in a toxic relationship. What do I need to do next? So, the next thing I would say is actually seek support, reach out to counseling, see about finding support groups. Honestly, try and step out and try to meet a new person, and find a new friend, like basically what we did at work.
There's always somebody that would be willing to listen. Always. I know that there's maybe some friends out there right now that are really, really going through it. Go to the police if you have to. If you are trapped, if you can't get out, go. There is nothing wrong with putting. I'm going to tell a story from somebody that I know because this is actually how they got out of their abusive relationship. Sometimes it's what you have to do. You put your kid in a stroller, you put a bunch of bags in a bunch of clothes in a trash bag, and you start walking. That's it. That's all it takes.
But with that comes faith. You gotta have that faith to trust that everything's gonna be okay with that too. And I think a lot of these women that are afraid to actually leave don't have that faith just yet.
And it's hard to find. It's hard to find after you've been battered down, after you've been put down so much, to actually have that. And I so beyond understand it. I've been there. It's a matter of trust. I would not be where I am today without being able to give my trust somewhere other. Not everybody is out there to hurt. The authorities aren't out there to hurt you. If you aren't doing wrong, they're there to help. They will always be there to help. If you are open and honest and accept your faults too, they will help you. I mean, there's one stigma that's surrounding some certain authority figures, is that society and the media tell us they're bad. These people are going to hurt you. They're going to take away your livelihood. They're going to take your kids. They're going to hurt you. These people are horrible. They will not help, but they will. If you are on the right side, if you are not throwing stones, assuming that you have no sin, if you are willing to be able to accept your faults and tell the truth and be honest and open about 100% of everything, every single one of those authority figures will recognize that and you will get help. It goes along with making sure that you're following. God tells us that if we praise him and if we follow his teachings and keep up with his commandments, there will always be something there for us. He will always be there for us. But he's not always going to reach out his hand and lift us out. So he puts people in the world that can, if we're open and honest and follow all of those teachings. If we are not in the wrong and we admit to our own sins, doors open up. But what I am going to do, I don't have it right now, but I am going to have in the description below on YouTube and Rumble and everywhere else that I can put it, some resources that if you are in a relationship that you can't get out of on your own, I'm going to put some resources down there for you to look and call. Just reach out to somebody. There's always someone to help. But I think that we should definitely wrap up with a good prayer.
I agree. I definitely think we should.
And with our discussion being on toxic relationships and being able to get out of those abusive relationships, and like I said, sometimes that is so impossible with how somebody's looking at their life in that time. So, friends, I'm going to say to make sure that you put your comments down there. I know Alaina and I both would love to hear your stories. Tell us how God helped you get through some of the hardest relationships in your life. Because what you tell us in the comments might help somebody else. And that's what we're here to do. Our stories, our viewpoints on something, your viewpoints on something might help one of our other friends. And that is what we are definitely here to do.
And then if you could also drop a comment and let us know if this message touched you, or if there's something that in the future you would actually want us to touch on, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think. We want to hear from you.
Not to mention, sometimes we're going to run out of ideas and we might need yours. Help! So today we're going to go ahead and end with a prayer for strength and for faith. And we are definitely sending this prayer out to all of our friends who need a little help. Dear Lord, I pray for strengthened faith today. Help me know more of your word and face all adversities with the confidence of victory. Let me move mountains with my faith and command things to fall in line in my life. Let me conquer all the evil in my life. Let my words cause healing and life. Let my faith build all the broken pieces. Help me remain strong, not be moved by any adversaries. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, and turn on notifications so that way you know when we're releasing our next episode next week. God bless.